nobody does a good job if they hate their job. And pretty much, there are some, but pretty much if you really like what you're doing, you're probably doing a great job.
Well, unlike you, I was not lucky enough to have professional training in publishing. And so, like so many people of my age and era, it became my profession by accident, as we've heard. I have a degree in music, and particularly in classical saxophone. So you can see that I'm really shooting for the small niches. It's a very small world that I came from in what I was pursuing in college and what I thought I would do with my career. But upon graduation, it became quite clear to me quite quickly that I was not going to pursue this music teaching, music as a career. So I got a job as a proofreader in a law publishing company in Cleveland, Ohio. And that was when we really sat across from one another and read copy out loud, every grammar point, every word, for hours a day. And this was the Ohio Revised Code. So that was a rather specialized and uninspired job, but I found that I really liked it. I found that I enjoyed reading the text, I enjoyed interacting with text, and my career just continued from there. I needed to leave that city because it was cold and rainy and dark, and I'd had enough of that area, so I came to Washington, and I found a great job for me in publishing as an entry-level editorial assistant in a music education magazine. So for me, that was putting all my strands together. It went on from there. And that was in the mid-'70s. So since that time up till now, I have worked in a variety of publishing environments. And they've all been different, but they've all held something for me that has kept my interest. So that's how I got my start.
Thank you. So I got my start from, I went to undergrad as a history major, and then decided at one point I wanted to teach, and so I went to get a master's and a PhD. But at some point, I was looking at my career prospects, and I said, studying early American religious history probably isn't the best way to get a stable job that doesn't require a whole lot of moving. And much as Stephen was saying, I was discovering I didn't love the sort of publish or perish mentality of academia. So while I was in a grad student position, I was also working for an organizational management consulting firm that sort of did some strategic planning, that sort of thing, for a number of both federal and private organizations. And the principal of the firm said, you might be interested in looking into the federal government. Since I'm local to DC, it seemed to be a good fit, a way to look at. So at the time, I applied for, if you've ever been on USA Jobs, there are thousands of positions, and you will get thousands of responses back saying you may or may not meet the requirements depending on which of the many bubbles you fill in. And that might take a few months to get even that. But I applied to a variety of them, and one of them stood out to me, working at the government printing office. It was a federal career intern program position, which is similar to the Presidential Management Fellows, or I think it's now been replaced with the Pathways program. And the great thing about that is I didn't necessarily know that much about GPO, although when I was doing my studies, I knew I'd use GPO products on a fairly regular basis, looking at congressional record, that sort of thing. But by getting into the federal career intern program, it gave me an opportunity to look at the agency and see different parts of it rotating through. I got broad exposure to different things we do, and that was great for me, not having a whole lot of exposure into the print world. But I think my advice would be to definitely, be looking at different opportunities and be willing to look at something that you're not entirely sure of where you're going. So.
And I think on the topic of government, I don't know how many people have an interest or are even thinking about working for through the government. One of the USA Jobs is just,
It's a fun site.
how many people have been on it?
I have not.
Yeah. How many people have enjoyed the experience? So USA Jobs, I find a terrible place to search for a job. The search engine is tough. So I've typed keywords in and found 0 results, knowing full well that can't be 0 results to the query. And as John was saying, thinking outside the box a little bit about different opportunities, one quick piece of advice, and we can talk much more depth about this if you come in and speak with me, because we have a lot of people who are interested in the federal government. One quick piece of advice is there's another site called usa.gov. So not usajobs.gov, but usa.gov. And that site is it's not a job site, but it's a great research site for finding, you say, well, where do you want to work in the federal government? So the same agencies, the same places pop up over and over again. But there's so many opportunities across so many different agencies. So this USA.gov site actually lists out for you the different agencies, and then lists out the different offices within the agencies, and then gives you links to get to their site so you can see what's going on there. And I would, if I were looking, I would just start clicking around and seeing, hey, what are some of these places? What's going on? Rather than just typing in job posting information on USA Jobs. That's one of the tools that's available that I don't think anybody really knows too much about USA.gov. So that's one of the things that I've come across. But USA Jobs is tough. And then also you mentioned the Pathways program. So this is new. It's sort of re-establishing the internship program in a more formalized, more centralized way. And I think, at least on the career services end, we're still kind of learning how this is going to play out. Presidential Management Fellows is still called that, and they're in fact, if you're interested in applying for this very selective, very special program through the federal government that's looking for leaders in all different kinds of fields, that I think opened today. And today on USA Jobs, you can start applying for that. I don't think our college has ever had a PMF, the College of Professional Studies, but we really, really want one. So you should take a look, because this is an amazing way. Pathways is a great way to get into the government, and then the PMF is the cream of the crop way to get in. But they're not just looking for the same kind of, they're looking for all different kinds of people and students. So if you're interested in learning more about that, they've got a very well-developed website, because they had some problems last year. So this year they got a very well-developed website and a very strong procedure, but I'm happy to go over it with anybody. Okay, so we've talked about how your careers have unfolded a bit. So now we're going to kind of, or maybe we ended up at the present day, and I'd love to hear more about your organizations, companies, the kind of work that you and others are doing, the kinds of work that you're seeing people coming on and participating in. Just kind of give us a sense of, because one of the things we want to learn about what people do, and then we want to learn about what different organizations and companies do. So, I don't, why don't we start with Stephen and we'll just pass it around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, Alexander Street Press, we digitize content. Let me think about what's hot and what's trending. At the moment, I think it's pretty clear that all content of substance is going to go electronic. And at least for our section of the industry, we've never been in print publishing, and we're pretty clear that it's just going to go away, at least as far as our sector is concerned. The reason we think it's going to go away is because the utility of paper isn't increasing at all. In fact, paper's just getting more and more expensive. Paper's labor-centric, and people get more and more expensive over time. What we notice, though, is that the move to electronic is still proceeding through phases. And we're still probably only in the second or third phase. And I would say there's maybe 6 or 7 phases to go. What I mean by this is the first phase of electronic was the mainframe, and then it went to a PC. What we're dealing with at the moment is the integration of content. I don't know if it's ever struck you how silly it is that there are several thousands. Is this on the mark, by the way? Okay, just stop me because I can go along on this for a long time. What seems to be happening is that in paper you could get away with hundreds of different reference works. But if you do a search today on Google for, say, Martin Luther King, do you really need 8.2 million results, most of which will actually give you a capsule, a biography of MLK's life? That's not really useful. So a lot of the focus at the moment is how do we actually get better aggregations? So examples of this are things like the open linking protocol, which is an attempt to allow digital objects to interoperate with each other in such a way that they can be constructive. So let me just put out a hypothetical of how that might be. Let's suppose I've written an article on MLK's early life. By advertising in tags that this particular digital object covers the subject MLK in a particular grade level at a particular time, it's then possible for somebody else to write an application that would integrate that piece of content with somebody else who happens to have written about the assassination. So that as you look at the world as a whole, as you look at the internet, these digital objects, as they're written, can interact with each other. That's the next phase of the internet. And you can actually see this happening. There are a number of initiatives going on at the moment. The Open Calais initiative. If you know about discovery services, how many here know about a discovery service? Oh. So when you go to a library, when you go to your own library these days, you're confronted by literally thousands of databases. A large university like, say, Columbia subscribes to over 25,000 journals. And maybe they've got 2,000 or 3,000 publishers that actually provide those pieces of content. So you're an academic and you're interested in finding everything out about, say, jazz saxophone. Well, which journal do you go to? Well, you can start with the first one, and there might be a nice general subject heading, but even under music, you're going to get literally hundreds of publishers and thousands of objects. So a number of publishing outfits have started that actually create what they call discovery services. And they go into these databases and they index them. So that subsequently when you key in a subject, it says, aha, this subject is actually covered in the following journals, in the following articles, and then it takes you directly to that piece of content. So that would be another example of integration.
Also, how many people do you have working with you, and what are some of the different positions
Absolutely.
that are...
Well, that's why I looked at you earlier, because I didn't know whether you wanted the kind of vision thing or... So in terms of what we actually have, the company splits up as follows. I would say about 20% of the company are software developers. And we have a challenge with software developers, which is that they're really good at software, but they're not very good at publishing. They don't tend to be thinking like academics. They're not editorially oriented. So they'll do things where you're like, you can't misspell that. That's not how you do it. Well, everyone will know that that's Nietzsche. I mean, no, but if you see a misspelling, everyone will think that we don't know how to publish properly.